The ballroom glittered under the soft glow of a dozen chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering golden light across the polished marble floors. Laughter and the clink of champagne glasses filled the air, a symphony of elegance and wealth. But in the corner of this opulent scene, a young woman stood frozen, her hands trembling as she clutched a silver tray. Her name was Lily Carter, and her emerald green dress, though modest, clung to her like a second skin, betraying her every nervous breath. A group of men in flashy varsity jackets circled her, their laughter sharp and cruel, slicing through the room's warmth like a winter wind. The tallest, wearing a blue and yellow jacket that screamed privilege, leaned in close, his breath hot with whiskey. "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" he sneered, loud enough to turn heads. "You don't belong here, sweetheart." Lily's face flushed, her eyes darting for an escape, but the crowd only watched, silent, complicit. This wasn't just a moment. It was the spark of a storm that would change everything. Hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories that'll keep you glued to the screen. Lily's heart pounded as she tried to step back, her tray of champagne flutes wobbling dangerously. She was 26, with chestnut hair pulled into a neat bun, her face delicate but strong, like porcelain that had survived 1,000 fires. She'd been a waitress at the Gilded Rose, New York City's most exclusive restaurant, for only 3 months, and tonight was her first time serving at their annual gala, a night where the city's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth and power. She'd dreamed of this job, a chance to escape the small-town shadows of her past in rural Ohio, where she'd been the poor kid in patched clothes, mocked by kids who didn't know hunger. But now, under the weight of those mocking eyes, that dream felt like a cage. The lead bully, Jake Ramsey, smirked as he flicked a droplet of champagne onto her dress. The liquid bloomed into a dark stain, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. "Oops," Jake said, his voice dripping with fake apology. "Guess you'll need to clean that up, huh? That's what you're good for, right?" His friends roared with laughter, their voices a chorus of cruelty that echoed off the ballroom's gilded walls. Lily's cheeks burned, but she held her head high, her jaw tight. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a survivor. Growing up, she'd faced taunts for her second-hand shoes and the way her stomach growled in class. She'd worked 2 jobs through high school to help her mom keep the lights on, and when her little brother, Tommy, was diagnosed with asthma, she'd promised him a better life. This job at the Gilded Rose was her ticket to that promise, a chance to save for Tommy's treatments and maybe, just maybe, prove to herself she was more than her past. But tonight, Jake's words cut deeper than any childhood taunt. They stripped away the confidence she'd built, exposing the scared girl she thought she'd left behind. She wanted to scream, to throw the tray at Jake's smug face, but the thought of Tommy's hospital bills kept her silent. She needed this job. Rent was due, and her brother's inhalers weren't cheap. So she swallowed her pride, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, sir, I'm just trying to do my job." Jake's eyes gleamed with delight at her submission. He stepped closer, towering over her, and grabbed the hem of her dress, tugging it slightly. "This dress," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "looks like it came from a thrift store. Did you borrow it from your mom?" The crowd's laughter stung like a slap, and Lily felt her knees weaken. She glanced around, desperate for someone to intervene, but the guests only watched, their faces a mix of pity and amusement. In the shadows of the ballroom, unnoticed by the crowd, a man stood leaning against a marble pillar. His name was Ethan Caldwell, and he was everything the room's glamour promised. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a tailored blue suit that hugged his frame like it was stitched by angels. His dark hair was swept back, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, but it was his eyes that held the real power, cold, piercing, and locked on the scene unfolding before him. Ethan wasn't just another guest. He was the owner of the Gilded Rose, a self-made billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, and tonight he was watching his wife, Lily, be humiliated in front of New York's elite. His fingers tightened around his whiskey glass, the ice clinking softly as his composure wavered. Ethan had always been a man of control, his emotions locked behind a wall of steel, but seeing Lily's pain cracked something deep inside him. He took a step forward, his polished shoes silent on the marble, his presence like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Jake, oblivious to the man watching from the shadows, escalated his torment. He snatched a champagne flute from Lily's tray and held it high, as if toasting the room. "To the help!" he bellowed, his voice slurring slightly. "For reminding us how good we have it!" His friends cheered, and one of them, a wiry guy with a buzz cut, grabbed another glass and poured it deliberately onto Lily's dress. The liquid soaked through, chilling her skin, and the crowd gasped, some in shock, others in delight. Lily's tray slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor in a shattering explosion of glass and champagne. The sound was deafening, a gunshot in the quiet elegance of the gala. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up the shards, her hands shaking as tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, over and over, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Jake crouched down, his face inches from hers, his breath sour. "Sorry doesn't cut it, sweetheart," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're out of your league here. Why don't you just crawl back to whatever hole you came from?" The words hit Lily like a fist, each one stripping away the armor she'd built over years of hardship. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never be seen again. But in that moment, as Lily knelt among the broken glass, her mind raced back to a memory that anchored her. She was 16 again, standing in the rain outside her childhood home, a crumbling trailer on the edge of town. Her mother had just been laid off, and the eviction notice was taped to the door, its ink smudged by the downpour. Lily had clutched Tommy's hand, his small body shivering, and promised him they'd be okay. She'd worked nights at a diner, scrubbing floors and serving coffee to truckers, saving every penny to keep them afloat. It was there, in that greasy diner, that she'd met Ethan, a boy with dreams as big as hers, who'd slip her extra tips and tell her she was destined for more. They'd fallen in love over late-night conversations, plotting a future where they'd rise above their circumstances. When Ethan started his first business, a small catering company, Lily was by his side, balancing trays and books, believing in him when no one else did. Now, years later, as Jake's cruel words echoed in her ears, Lily felt that same fire reignite. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a fighter, a partner, a woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty alongside the man she loved. She looked down at the glass in her hands, sharp and jagged, and for a fleeting moment imagined using it to fight back. But she didn't need to. She felt Ethan's presence before she saw him, a warmth that cut through the cold humiliation. He was coming for her, and Jake had no idea what was about to hit him. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension coiling tighter, as Lily rose to her feet, her eyes locking with Ethan's across the ballroom. This was their moment, and she was ready. Ethan stepped out of the shadows, his presence commanding the room like a king entering a battlefield. The crowd parted instinctively, their whispers falling silent as he approached. Jake, still crouched over Lily, didn't notice until Ethan's shadow fell over him, dark and heavy. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan's voice was low, controlled, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. Jake looked up, startled, and scrambled to his feet, brushing off his jacket as if to reclaim his confidence. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped, his bravado faltering under Ethan's icy stare. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He knelt beside Lily, his movements gentle but deliberate, and helped her to her feet. His hand lingered on her arm, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. Lily's eyes met his, and for a moment the world faded. The crowd, the broken glass, the humiliation. All she saw was Ethan, her husband, the man who'd loved her since they were teenagers, who'd promised her they'd conquer the world together. "I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said finally, turning to Jake, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "And this is my restaurant." The room fell deathly silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Jake's face paled, his smirk vanishing as if slapped off. His friends shifted uncomfortably, their laughter replaced by nervous glances. Ethan's gaze never left Jake's, his eyes burning with a fury that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "And that," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is my wife you're speaking to." The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the room. Lily, still trembling, felt a surge of strength as Ethan's hand tightened around hers. This was no longer just her fight, it was theirs. Jake stammered, his confidence crumbling like cheap plaster. I didn't know," he said, his voice high and desperate. "It was just a joke, man, no harm done." Ethan's lips curled into a smile, but it was cold, predatory. "A joke," he repeated, stepping closer to Jake, who instinctively backed away. "You think humiliating my wife in front of all these people is a joke?" The room was electric with tension, every guest leaning in, sensing the storm about to break. Ethan turned to the crowd, his voice rising, commanding their attention. "Let me make something clear," he said, his words ringing with authority. "The Gilded Rose is a place of respect, of dignity, and anyone who thinks they can come in here and tear that down will answer to me." Lily watched Ethan, her heart swelling with a mix of love and awe. She remembered the boy he'd been, working double shifts at a diner to save for their first apartment, proposing under a starry Ohio sky with a ring he could barely afford. They'd built this life together, from nothing to everything, and now he was standing up for her in a way that made her feel invincible. But Jake, desperate to save face, made a fatal mistake. "Come on, man," he said, forcing a laugh. "She's just a waitress. You can't be serious." The words were like gasoline on a fire, and Ethan's smile vanished. In one swift motion, Ethan signaled to the security team, who materialized from the edges of the room like shadows given form. "Escort Mr. Ramsey and his friends out," Ethan said, his voice calm but final. "They're no longer welcome here." Jake's eyes widened, his bravado replaced by panic as two burly guards grabbed his arms. "You can't do this!" he shouted, struggling as they dragged him toward the exit. "Do you know who I am? My father's a senator." Ethan didn't flinch. "And I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said simply. "Tell your father to call my lawyer." The crowd erupted in whispers as Jake and his friends were hauled out, their protests fading into the night. But Ethan wasn't done. He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the guests who'd stood by and watched Lily's humiliation. "Every one of you who laughed, who did nothing," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "you're complicit. This isn't just my restaurant. It's a place where people like Lily, who work harder than any of you will ever understand, are treated with respect. If you can't honor that, you can leave." A few guests shifted uncomfortably, their faces flushed with shame, but no one dared speak. Ethan took Lily's hand and led her to the center of the room, under the brightest chandelier. "This is my wife," he said, his voice softening but still commanding. "And she's the heart of this place. If you can't see that, you don't deserve to be here." Tears streamed down Lily's face, but they weren't tears of shame anymore. They were tears of pride, of love, of vindication. The crowd, chastened, began to applaud, a slow ripple that grew into a wave of admiration. Lily looked at Ethan, her voice trembling but strong. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Always," he said. The gala resumed, but it was different now. Humbled, reverent, as if the room itself had been reminded of what truly mattered. Lily returned to her duties, but this time the guests treated her with a respect that bordered on awe. Word of the incident spread like wildfire, and by morning the Gilded Rose was trending online, not for its luxury, but for the story of a waitress and her husband who'd stood up to a bully and won. As the night ended, Ethan and Lily stood on the restaurant's balcony, overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily shook her head, leaning into him. "You made it right," she said. "You always do." They stood in silence, the city's lights stretching out before them, a reminder of how far they'd come. The bullies were gone, their arrogance shattered. and Lily felt stronger than ever. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman who'd faced the worst and come out unbroken, with a man who'd fight for her to the ends of the earth. Hey, that's the story of Lily and Ethan, a couple who turned humiliation into a moment of triumph. What did you think of their story? And here's a question for you. From which part of the country are you watching this video? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that'll keep you hooked. Until next time, stay strong and never let anyone dim your light.